Back in the days of the original Monster Hunter game on the PS2, there were only 6 weapons to choose from, 7 if you count the inclusion of the dual blades in the Western release. One of these weapons is the hammer, one of the most iconic impact weapons in the series and a popular option for hunters looking to knock the ever-loving shit out of an unsuspecting monster. A simplistic weapon, but one not without its own appeal. The hammer has a long history of being part of any effective hunting team, and as an impact weapon is highly sought after for making sure all parts can be broken on monsters, especially monsters like Barroth who have incredibly durable ridges on their head. Unfortunately, not every monster part is weak to longsword. I know, it's a travesty, but we'll have to suffer through it for now. As I mentioned in the previous videos, I like to take your opinions into consideration when it comes to which weapon I will cover next. I made sure to take a peek at all the comments, and there seemed to have been an overwhelming amount of them asking for the hammer to be discussed, so, here we are. If you want your weapon to be covered next, be sure to let me know in the comments, and please consider liking and subscribing so YouTube's algorithm will bless me in the future. They've kidnapped my family and refused to give them back to me unless my video has a high engagement rating. So fingers crossed. In the meantime, I'm Super Rad, once again joined by Flyann, and this is the history of the hammer. A good portion of the weapon changes seen between Generation 1 and 2 are fairly minimal, but they are there. For that reason, we're going to bundle all of them into one section covering the start of Generation 1 and looking at how the weapon advanced all the way to Freedom Unite. Similar to the Greatsword in Generation 1, the hammer mostly functions under a hit-and-run playstyle. The hunter would see the most benefit through attacking and then generally rolling or repositioning out of the way in order to engage briefly once again. The big difference between the Greatsword and hammer, however, was the type of damage each applied. While the Greatsword was one of the best weapons at applying high slashing damage, the hammer was one of the best and almost only ways of applying high impact damage, which was not only effective at breaking specific monster parts, ones generally more dense than say a tail or a wing, but also had the added ability of stunning or knocking out monsters in later generations. However, in Generation 1, the ability to stun these monsters was not yet implemented into impact weapons, meaning your main reasoning for selecting this weapon was both the high damage and the ability to break monster parts you may not typically be able to. To go over some of the attacks briefly, some of the main moves include a short jab attack that is quick to perform but low damage, an overhead swing that's slower but a little stronger, and a pound combo that can be performed by consecutively pressing up on the right analog stick in the PS2 releases and on the triangle or X button in subsequent releases. Now, if you remember from my Greatsword video, the weapon didn't actually receive its charge mechanic until Generation 2, but the hammer not only had a similar charge mechanic already implemented in the PS2 game, but has multiple sub-mechanics that make it incredibly useful and more versatile than you may expect. First, there's the level 1 charge, which performs a quick attack with little damage, then the level 2 charge that will perform a double hit, and finally the level 3 charge that performs one of the most powerful attacks for the weapon, the Super Pound, which has a large buildup but deals such an excessive amount of damage that it's especially useful when you have a monster downed. What makes the hammer's charge mechanic truly unique is what hunters can do while charging. Specifically, the hunter gains the ability to move while charging at the cost of stamina, making it one of the most mobile weapons in the game for the amount of damage it can produce. Not only that, but if the hunter is moving when they release the level 3 charge, they will enter the spin attack, which has its own sub-mechanics based on everything we've already discussed. While spinning, the hunter has the ability to press up on the right analog stick, and depending on how many spins have taken place, a specific finisher will be produced. If the hunter presses up on the second or third spin, they'll perform the double attack I mentioned before where they'll lunge forward slightly and then hit with an uppercut swing, but if they press up on the fourth spin, they'll produce the golf swing attack, which is the most powerful attack in the hammer's arsenal. Simply letting all of the spins finish will lead into an upswing motion that is meant to act as a long animation to punish for not ending the spin early. So really the golf swing attack is the most effective. Funny enough, I was recording some of this footage on a Japanese copy of the PS2 game, and I realized that some of the moveset is different depending on if you were playing the Western version or the Japanese release. As an example, the golf swing mechanic can actually be performed by simply pressing up on the right analog stick 3 times, producing a double pound into golf swing combo, but this isn't possible in Japan. Just something I thought was cool and something that stopped being a factor with the release of Monster Hunter G onward. Throughout the first and second generation, the weapon also has access to multiple draw mechanics, including a traditional draw attack and the ability to charge out of the draw with a proper button combination. Other than switching to button attacks instead of the analog stick, the real major change in Generation 2 was introducing KO damage and the ability to stun monsters, leaving them open for heavy damage. Hammer was definitely a defining part of this mechanic, and while it was introduced early, it wouldn't be until Freedom Unite that the stun visual was actually implemented. I'm specifically talking about how the weapon will shoot off yellow sparks when hitting the monster on the head, visualizing that the hunter is contributing to knockout damage. This would become the main focus of the hammer and its main identity. The weapon was and still is known for being a knockout king, and how it can utilize the opportunity of a knocked out monster rippled throughout each generation, taking a simplistic weapon but making it a dominant factor in the meta of Monster Hunter. Now let's take a look at Generation 3 and see what small amount of changes were added.
One of the biggest changes in Gen 3 would be how the level 2 charge attack has been reworked. Instead of performing a double strike maneuver, the hunter instead now performs an uppercut swing. And most of the charging moves, including this new uppercut swing, can be comboed out of easily, allowing the hunter to output damage at a much higher rate than was previously possible in the previous generations. On top of the new move, the swinging mechanic changed the type of finisher that would be performed if the hunter canceled out of it early. Originally, the hunter would perform the lunging double swing attack, but now would perform the more useful uppercut swing that was faster, safer, and overall a better option to use within a hunt, but still not better than the golf swing. The uppercut launches the hunter forward slightly and is great for closing distance on a monster. It really is a weapon that benefits from its simplicity and allows it to be effective and accessible within every generation up to and including this point. Luckily, there are some other big mechanical changes we can discuss. To start, similar to how the hunter can press the main attack button, triangle in most cases, 3 times to produce the pound into a golf swing combo, they can now also start the combo off with the circle button for a quick side swing into pound into golf swing, adding a little bit more variety to the weapon overall when it comes to attacking. Comboing is so effective at this point that the hammer also has several infinites it can perform, generally following one of the main combos into a golf swing, followed by a level 1 charge attack, and then back into the original combo. The weapon can perform and weave through these moves with little to no downtime. It was a serious game changer within its generation and made the weapon so much more versatile and welcoming to use, upping the damage output considerably. It should also be noted that Gen 3 introduced the exhaustion mechanic, which allowed hunters to slow down monsters and keep them in place by physically exhausting them, forcing them to recover over time, and weapons could now inflict this type of damage. For example, the super pound move was much better at inflicting exhaust damage than the uppercut, while the uppercut was better at stunning or KOing monsters. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds short. It seems like while there weren't that many changes made to the hammer in Gen 3, the ones that do exist were incredibly effective. The quality far outweighs the quantity in this generation. And if that doesn't sway you, there's one more thing we gotta talk about here. The goddamn Grungagas.
Stop right there, you hammer-wielding fucking casual. Do you see this? Do you see this shit? That's right, bitch, it's the goddamn Grungagas.
But it looks like an Uragan testicle on a stick. You pour yourself a nice hot cup of shut the fuck up and take a look at the stats on this mean son of a bitch.
You're reading that right, it's 1508 raw. That's higher than any other hammer. Scratch that, any other weapon in the goddamn game.
Oh, and what's that? Plus 25 defense? Thanks, Grungagas. What a fucking bro.
And yeah, the negative affinity is lame. Life's not fair. Monster Hunter certainly isn't. Get over it.
What's that? You want to max this shit as far as it can go? Well, there, Missy, you just try not to soak through your poogie print panties while we crunch these numbers.
The hammer's modifier is 5.2, you fucking scrub. Learn the damage formula, pleb. You got the goddamn Grungagas. You got AUL or Honed Blade. You got the Power Charm. You got Power Talon, Demon Drug, Mega Demon Drug. Note that these don't stack. Might Seed and Might Pill. Also, these do not stack.
With all these juicy buffs, we get up to 1856. What's that? Someone's got a big dick? Playing like a real manly man, are we? Alright then, curl up your mustache and roll up your sleeves while we activate feline heroics. 2,506. Did I fucking stutter, bitch? 2,506.
Splish!
But look at that sharpness. What am I supposed to do with blue sharpness? You take another sip of that, shut the fuck up, because yes, you'll need sharpness +1 or Honed Blade for this bad boy to make him any good, because then what? Purple.
That means his sharpness modifier goes from 1.2 to 1.44, which on top of being the best possible return for your 10 skill points, means a nearly 25% increase in damage. What's that? You're running a set with Awaken?
There's a good little boy. Now this Soul Crusher has 400 slime.
Plus 80 with Bombardier, plus 40 with Pyro, maxing at 520. Bitch.
That shit will slime your little sister and won't even call her in the morning. I'm probably gonna cut this part out.
I'm sorry, it's in the script. But wah! Slime is cheap and it's better to use elemental weakness. Wah!
You bite your tongue, fuckwit. Hammer's elemental modifiers are utter shit anyway.
Slime explosions equal staggers for days. And when you're grinding 4-point or pack mentality to get your scrawny ass to HR 125, you'll take all the damage you can fucking get.
Once you get yourself this beautiful lump on a stick, you'll never have to run to the marina to change sets ever fucking again. You'll get to stand there in the tavern, get drunk as fuck, and prance like the motherfucking badass you are. So get ready to break some chins, bitch. You'll be farming Feel the Heat G2 for a while.
Because once you go goddamn Grongagas,
you never go back. Moving on to Generation 4, we can see how verticality and the ability to use aerial attacks affected the hammer. Spoiler alert, it didn't do much. Not much at all, really. All of the combo abilities are still there for the weapon, and now when you're jumping off a ledge, you can perform an aerial attack, which you can also combo out of. Each charge level also has its own aerial attack that can be performed. The first charge level will allow you to perform a strong pound attack that can be comboed out of, but generally won't be used by any hunter in the game. Chances are you're going to be in charge level 2 or 3 whenever you jump off the ledge because charge level 1 is such a short time frame. The level 2 charged aerial attack is a stronger pound. It can't be comboed into as easily, and its only follow-up is an uppercut, but it's fairly powerful. Regardless, the level 3 charge is even more powerful and gets followed up by a golf swing, making its damage output much higher than the previous options. One important feature introduced in this generation is the ability to climb ledges while charging, which continues the tradition of the hammer being surprisingly mobile throughout each game. On to Generations, we can take a look at some of the arts and styles that helped flesh out the weapon overall. Guild and sometimes Adept style were probably the most actively used versions within the original release of Generations, and Valor and Alchemy became useful factors within the Ultimate release. Guild style is exactly what you expect it to be and focuses on the core mechanics of the hammer we have seen in each previous generation. Since the weapon is so simplistic, it's already incredibly effective at what it does, meaning Guild style is perfect for anyone looking to optimize damage. While I don't want to focus on Adept style too much, it is interesting to note that it introduces the supercharge mechanic, which provides the hammer with 3 new charge attacks that are generally stronger than your traditional moves. The supercharge can only be activated after a successful evade and also charges the charged jumping attacks as well. Alchemy style mostly functioned as Guild style with a few added benefits, namely being able to slot in an extra art and the overarching abilities of Alchemy Barrel. Some moves are slightly limited, but overall it's a great option for hunters that like Guild style with added abilities. Once again, Valor style dominates another weapon in terms of effectiveness. The Valor Sheath cancel moves include a powerful upward swing or a side smash attack, and easily build up meter to put the hunter into the Valor state. Once in the Valor state, the opportunities for high damage really begin to open up. Rather than simply charging from level 1 to level 3, hunters can now attack out of level 1 charge, charge to level 2, attack again, charge to level 3, and end things with a strong finisher. Or, once in level 3, hunters can begin a second tier of charge that will allow them to perform an even more devastating finisher similar to what we see in Adept style. And if you knock out the monster, oh baby, it's over for them. On to Hunter arts, the spinning meteor art is probably the most utilized out of all the possible options, with absolute readiness not far behind. The move is incredibly powerful, not so much in its buildup of 5 spinning hits, but in its absolutely absurd finisher, which has some of the highest motion values the weapon has ever seen. It's a great ability to use when you've knocked out or trapped a monster, and it's just so ridiculously powerful that you'd be crazy not to slot it in. Another art that doesn't see as much use is the Impact Press introduced in Generations Ultimate. It's an overtime ability that adds shockwave effects to charge attacks on the hammer. This can be especially beneficial on Valor style as the hunter will be performing multiple charge attacks in succession. These shockwaves act as extra hits and contribute mostly to knockout damage, meaning you'll have a much easier time knocking out a monster and opening them up for high damage finishers. And with that, I think we've covered everything of note within Generation 4. All that's really left is to move on to Generation 5 and see what World, Iceborne, and Rise have in store for us.
Like most weapons, World began a large rework on both controls and mechanics. The side smack move that was assigned to its own button can now be performed with triangle and a directional input. So then what does circle do now? Well, it introduced a brand new move known as Big Bang, which, as long as the hunter hits the monster each time, can be comboed consecutively up to 4 times before ending the combo with the Big Bang finisher. Each hit is stronger than the last, and the finisher is absolutely bonkers in the amount of damage dealt. Truly the most unga bunga move I've seen up to this point. In terms of sliding attacks, the most notable is the charge slide maneuver, which has many options for actions out of it. The hunter can press triangle to perform a powerful aerial slam or simply release the charge to perform this crazy spinning aerial maneuver. To be the most effective, however, the hunter will need to utilize a brand new mechanic to this iteration, the power charge. While charging the hammer, players can press circle to cancel out of the charge and enter the power charge state, and this state will stay active as long as the hunter's weapon is unsheathed or until they get hit by either the monster or another hunter. When performing a sliding charge, hunters can press the circle button to quickly enter this state. It benefits the player to always be in the state as damage outputs will be higher and KO damage is also increased. Honestly, I can't stress enough how much some moves benefit from the state. Some of the finishers and charge attacks did exponentially higher damage in comparison to an uncharged attack and had new animations. So what about Iceborne? Well, hunters can perform a slinger burst while charging, and this will not interrupt their charge state, meaning they can use this to flinch a monster and still get off a full level 3 charge. Additionally, after the level 2 charged upswing, hunters can press the clutch claw attack to grapple onto the monsters and tenderize it. This can also be performed after that crazy spinning aerial move, and now when grappling toward the monster, the hunter will continue with extra aerial spinning hits for higher damage.
Finally, moving on to Rise, we can take a look at the demo once again for the currently available moves and Silkbind abilities. The big differences here mechanically are mostly how power charge functions. Rather than being a temporary state the hunter activates, it's now a permanent state that the hunter can switch between and is denoted by the color of the hammer icon beside their sharpness gauge. The traditional style is a yellowish orange hammer, also visually seen within the glow around the hammer while charging. If the hunter switches to the powered state, the icon will turn blue, and so will the color of the charge around the hammer. Animations change in between each state, and the hunter can perform an evade step while switching between them. If the hunter sheathes their weapon or gets hit, they will not revert to their previous state, meaning it is completely manual now in Rise in comparison to how it was in World. At the moment, with the demo, there's no real way of knowing exactly what has changed in this state. Since the power charge is now a permanent stance, one would logically assume that instead of simply improving damage and knockout output, that there is some sort of downside to balance out the two stances and make one more useful within specific scenarios over the other. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait until the release of the full game to get those answers, but it does seem like the power state no longer simply provides a damage boost and instead just changes animations and attacks, which generally have higher motion values. Additionally, swapping from power charge to default instantly gives you a max charge, making it useful for quickly firing off a level 3 charge attack or one of your Silkbind attacks that relies on the level of charge you currently have. Another notable change is that the default stance can perform the Big Bang finisher out of the spinning attack now. One of the Silkbind moves shown to us is simply the spinning aerial attack we saw introduced in World. Instead of needing to slide down to activate it, it can now be used on demand as long as you have the wire bugs to activate it. I personally think turning this attack into a Silkbind mechanic is a little lackluster, as it was perfectly usable as an environmental mechanic, so hopefully some of the other Silkbind attacks make up for it. The charge level you activate this in would determine the amount of potential spins possible, but overall it didn't seem like a big deal, and you're honestly better off saving your Silkbind charge attacks for the next ability. The second Silkbind attack, Impact Crater, is the move where damage is determined based on the charge level you activated on. The hunter will launch themselves into the air and come down with a powerful smashing attack. The higher the charge level, the more effective this move is overall, so swapping into a level 3 charge from power stance and activating this ability is highly useful. A level 3 Impact Crater could be close to double the motion value of no charge. And that's all we have for Generation 5 and Rise. It'll be interesting to see what else the weapon brings to the table within the full game. If there is any weapon within this series that has managed to hold onto its simplicity the most, it's definitely the hammer. Mechanically, it very gradually changed throughout each generation, and while many of the changes were incredibly useful, they weren't very substantial. It was a true quality over quantity scenario. Comparing it from Generation 1 to Generation 5, the weapon is almost identical on the surface to what it was in the past, and that's probably because it didn't need many improvements overall in order to keep up with every other weapon in the series. It was great from the get-go, and that hasn't changed. Anyway, that's all I have for you today in regards to the hammer. If you enjoyed this video, again, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Let me know what your favorite weapon is and what weapon you want me to cover next. Thanks so much to my friend Flyann for participating in this video. You can find their information in the description, and I highly suggest checking them out for all of your JRPG content. And thanks so much to you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video.